everybody, it's Claire here from Sewn by Claire, and today we're going to be making the dressing gown for Luna Lapin. Now obviously this fits the other characters as well, but this video is especially for Lynn Harris, who's one of my subscribers, who's very kindly sponsored this video for us, as Lynn wanted to know how to make this dressing gown, and so I'm very happy to oblige. So this is the dressing gown that I've made today in the tutorial, in the sew along, whatever you want to call it. And we've got these lovely piped pockets. We've got piping around the sleeves here and along the front, and this lovely roll collar, which is all part of the pattern. And then we've got the belt going around the back, and then we finished it off with these lovely little belt loops, thread belt loops, that I'll show you how to make as well. So I just want to say thank you very much to Lynn for her kindness and her support, and I hope that you really enjoy this video, Lynn, and on behalf of both me and everybody else who watches this video in the years to come, I want to say thank you very much. So let me get on with the video then, and we'll get started. So in the kit we've got this red cord piping, which goes, as we can see from the pattern, around the edge of the dressing gown, on the pockets and on the sleeves. We've got our pattern with our pattern pages, and we've also got our instructions. The other thing that we've actually got here as well is our piece of fabric here. Now the fabric, I did have this out earlier, and the fabric is quite tight on the pattern, so we're going to be really careful when we're laying this out, ready to cut this out. The one thing that I was surprised about was that there was no thread in this pattern. As you know, when you make the patterns for the characters, then there's often the thread as well attached in with the kit. But literally, that's what you get in the kit: your piping, your fabric for the dressing gown, and then your pattern booklet and the pattern pages. So what we've got here is, I've actually chosen a thread here. Now I've got a Gutterman, and it's actually colour 362. It's a Gutterman polyester thread. I'm happy with sewing that, so I'm going to use that, and I think that's a pretty good match there on that fabric for me. So yeah, if you wanted to, then Gutterman 362 is your friend if you've got the same fabric as me. If you're using fabric from your stash, then you'll need to find something from somewhere else. We can talk about binding as well, because there's two types of binding. There's one that's cut on the straight of grain of the fabric, so you'll know, I can't use this, but I'm just going to use this as an example. So we know that any fabric that's either cut across east to west or north to south, along with the bias edge, this is the bound edge where we've got those little dots that tells us the colours that have been used in the printing, then we know that that's going to be straight of grain and that there's no stretch in that at all. Sometimes we can use that if we were edging something that's square, say, like, you know, you've got a pattern booklet here. I know you're not going to sew that, but just for example, your article was square like this and you've got square corners. You don't need to worry about it being on the bias, because the bias does use a lot more fabric. You can use straight of grain binding then, that would then sit above your binding on your item, and then there's a way of snipping it to make it just sit at a right angle in order to go round a corner. However, if you're binding something with a curve, so here we've got a curve on this wool press mat, then you need to have a binding that has a give, because you want it to stretch around that corner to give you a really nice finish. So there's two ways of doing binding. This one here, I can tell by looking at the fibres on it, is actually done on a bias. So the fibres are actually going across diagonally, either one way or the other, and that has been designed so that when you use it around the edges, you can see how that will curve with your fabric. Whereas because the fabric has been cut on the bias, whereas if it's straight of grain, it's not going to do that. First thing I'm going to do is trace off my pattern pieces. If you're a follower of mine, you know that I like to keep my master pattern intact, because what you can find is that over time, if you use your paper pattern for your cutting out, you can sometimes shave a little bit off the edges of your pattern pieces. And over time, you'll reduce the size of that pattern piece. So we'll always take the tracing paper, put it over the top, and then just trace the lines through any marks. And we're particularly looking out for any notches. So like we've got notches here. We've got notches here and here. So look out for any of those as you're sewing, and also dots, and we'll talk about how to deal with those. There's a few on here because there'll be different match points that we need to match up, and also we'll probably put some on for the pocket placement as well, just so that we've got that in the right place for that as well. So we'll talk about tailor's tacks. We've done that before, but for now I'm just going to get some tracing paper, trace my pattern pieces off, and then I will then fold these original pattern pieces up and keep that as a master copy with my pattern booklet and in with my patterns, and that's there for you then, available for future use. Okay, so here we can see it all set up for my tracing. First thing that I tend to do is just mark off where I've got some corners on my tracings, because that means then that if any of the tracings then start to come off, I'll know about it, because these edges here don't match up. So it just gives you a little bit of a starting point for your tracing. So we now know that that's going to twist. The next thing that I do is also use a straight edge so that I can trace along these straight edges, which is why we're using a straight edge, nice and quickly and easily as well, and that sometimes cuts down on your tracing time if you think that it's a waste of time to trace it. Obviously curved lines like this, then I'll just go over the line through the fabric, not through the fabric, through the tracing paper, but then anything else I can just trace across really quickly and easily. So I'm just going to carry on. I'm just going to trace across all of these lines, making sure that I'm marking all my notches and also all my dots and any markings that we need that signify that that is a fold. So we'll put all of those marks in as well. So we've got all of that on there, and right fold on there. And that will then help us get set up. So I'm just going to go ahead and just finish off doing this, and then we'll get sorted out in terms of talking about the fabric. Okay, so once you've traced out your pattern, put your pattern pieces to one side, your master ones, and then using your paper scissors, you're just going to rough cut around these individual pattern pieces. We'll actually cut out on the lines when it comes to cutting the pieces out of the fabric, but for now I just like to rough cut them out like that. See the pencil line there, just got a small margin ready for pinning onto our fabric. So I'll just finish that off with the rest of those, and we'll look at the next stage. So before we lay our pattern pieces out, we can see we've got some quite deep lines on this fabric. So I'm just going to open this out now, and then just using my wool pressing mat and my iron, I'm just going to iron those creases out now, just so that that's all ready for us to work with. Just makes it easier if we can work to our own creases and folds rather than those that, because these have been put in for packaging, but they can distort your finished garment if you're not careful. Just check the temperature of your iron as well. You don't want this too hot because we don't want to damage the fabric, especially if you're using a silk as well. Just keep your eye on that as well. But on this cotton it should be fine. You can always just test it first on a little corner before you start to actually apply your main iron to it, just to make sure that that's okay. Now there is a diagram in the pattern book for how to cut this out, which is here. So double thickness with the folds there, and then across to the selvage edge, because we always want to be working with the selvage edge where we can. So let's identify that. The selvage edge is here notified by the typing on there or writing on there. And then we don't want to be using that selvage edge, so we want to be putting this fabric right up to as square as we can do, because as I said before, there isn't a lot of room for manoeuvre on this. And making sure, one way you can make sure you've got a good fold on this is have a look at your pattern down the edge here. So I can see here that I've got more of the circle there than I have here, so I know that's not quite straight enough. So let me just pull that a little bit over a little bit more first. And that's what we're just trying to work to, that level of accuracy, because that's going to give us the best results that we can. Get a pencil out from underneath there. Now, I'm going to work with the selvage side down, just because I want to be aware of where the edge of the fabric is and that I'm not going to go over that. And if you can see, it's just been cut slightly off off centre on there because a little bit too much there, a little bit off there. I hope that's not going to affect us, but pretty much that's straight now. So looking at the diagram, let me go that way with it. Also decide if there's an up or a down. I don't think there is on this fabric. So the tie belt is going to go across the bottom just here. So let's just line that up so that we're fine. And again, we can line that up with a point on the pattern to make sure that that's straight all the way across. And then we're going to use our pins, which I've got somewhere. Hold on 1 second. Oh no, I found them, it's okay. They're here. So we're just going to use that, and using the fold edge as a reference point, we are just going to pin our tie belt on to our fabric. We'll see how we get on with these pins. If they're too thick, we'll use my silk pins because it's a fine fabric. So I'm just pinning in from the pencil edge into the actual pattern piece, but I'm just wanting to make sure that I kind of, if possible, stay in the seam allowance so that that's not going to leave any holes in the fabric should we wish to when we actually come to sew it. And one across the bottom here should hold that. Now I have noticed that my tie belt finishes just there on the pattern, and look, there's a little bit short on the fabric. I'm not going to worry about that because I think in this length of tie belt a few millimetres is not going to make the difference, but just be aware you've not got it too far off the edge of your fabric. Right, next thing we're going to do then is we're going to put the sleeve, and the sleeve goes up the top here. And again, just make sure you've got all of the top of your pieces all in the same direction, because that will help you with your pattern placement. Okay, and then we've got our pocket is going to go over here. Just need to separate out these pattern pieces here. I thought they would be okay left as one, but they do need to be separated. Once we've got all the pattern pieces on, I'll then just have a quick look, see if I think I can jig it round a little bit just to save any more fabric, which you know is one of my penchants to try and do. Just like to try and save as much fabric as we can. Just carefully just cutting these out. I should have done this before, my apologies. Right, okay. So this piece here is going to go here. Put it up to that one just there. This piece here goes here, but slightly up towards the pocket. And then this piece here on the fold is going to go down here. Yeah, that's pretty good. I feel like I might want to move those down a little bit. But yeah, it gives us a nice little bit of spare here, doesn't it? Just for another project, another time. We can't see where it is. Just slightly off, but this bit here is going to give us that bit there. So what I'm going to do is going to pin this folded one on first, because that's the most important one, because if you lose your fold, then we've not got anywhere to go. But I can put those lines right up on top of each other so that I'm only cutting once. Make sure your folded line goes on the back, because if it's not lined up right on the back there, you're going to then end up with having too big a piece. And because the collar goes around the back of the neck on this, we need it to be really accurate, so make sure that line is right on your fold. So pinning that on, oh, might go through the fabric, that's it. If you're already comfortable with pinning your fabric, then you can just go straight on to the next section. But if you've not done this before, and this is your first garment, then you're going to want to just make sure that you're comfortable with what you're doing and getting this onto the fabric. So that's the fold piece on now. So now I'm going to put this next piece on, and again I'm going to take it right down, because so long as we don't go over the edge of this one here at the top, then we will be fine. I think I'll just take off some of this so it's a little bit more accurate, so that we can see where we are going to. Okay, and we've got that bottom line there. Let's take that line off and we'll be able to see there too. So let's line that up on the bottom and that one up to there, so that's pretty much touching. I'm just going to put a pin in the bottom just to hold it still for me, because the next thing I want to do is just check that this is straight of grain. And the way that we do that is we get a tape measure. We know that we've put our folded piece here on the straight of grain, so I'm going to measure to this far edge now because that's straight all the way up. So if I measure, let's measure in centimetres, from that line there across to the folded edge, just over 16.2 centimetres. So now if I go to the top here, because that was a straight line, and then measure across, I can adjust this a little bit until we get to 16.2 centimetres, lying flat and straight. And I will know then that that piece of fabric is straight of grain. So then I can put a pin at the top here, and I know that that's all lying all correctly. So now I can go ahead and pin the rest of this fabric onto our rest of the pattern onto the fabric. Sorry, sometimes I get my words wrong because I'm just concentrating to try and get this done. Okay. So again, keep your pins in close to the edge so that if there are any pulled threads, then they are close to the edge into the seam allowance. And a bit of a curved edge on there. Okay. The next one I want to do is this one. Let's just take off some of this edge here, just so that we can see it against the edge of the fabric. Just be careful not to shave anything off as you're cutting your pattern piece out. Okay, let's got that bit. And yeah, we've got to be careful this curve at the top here, haven't we? So that one's going to go in there. Line that up with the line on the tie belt. Put a pin at the bottom, and then I'm going to do exactly the same as I've just done for the other one. Let's measure from here to the edge here, and we're 26.4 there. So let's go to the edge of this piece here, because that's the furthest we can go, and that's 26.5. So it needs to just come in just a bit, a couple of millimetres, and then we can be sure that that's on straighter grain. 26.5, one more millimetre in, and yeah, it just fits on your fabric, so just be really careful with this. There is no room for error at all. So just pin this on here. So I'm going to carry on pinning. I'm going to put my sleeve on as well. I'll tuck that down as far as I can do, save a little strip of fabric at the top there, and then we'll also put the pocket on with the top up. So just make sure you've got the top of all your pieces all going up, apart from the tie belt that goes across, and then we'll have a little smidge of fabric left at the end, won't we, which might do something at some stage. Let's cut out this tie first. That's going to go straight across the bottom. So keep your scissors hard flat onto the work surface, and then you're just going to cut on the line, the drawn line. Nice long snips. Lovely sound, isn't it? All the way along to the edge. And then I'm just going to take that off for a second, and we are going to then cut this one across the bottom here, and then back down the other side. So accuracy when you're cutting out is really important, because if you're a millimetre too much or too little, over a couple of seams, that can make all the difference on these size garments. So you do need to make sure that you are cutting as tightly to those marks as you can do. There we go. So all your scraps put to one side so they can get thrown away. And we've got one piece cut out already, so just pop that to one side. And then I'm going to cut out the pocket next, I think. Just get these nice straight pieces cut out and out of the way. We're going to mark our notches later, so I'm not going to worry about that just at the moment. Tuck that pin in so I don't cut through any pins. pieces out. Okay, I'm just going to carry on doing this and just cutting out all of these pieces now, and then just putting them to one side, and then we'll talk about marking the notches on them to make sure that we've got them ready and we're ready to put our jigsaw puzzle together. Okay, so I'll come back to you in a moment when I've done that. Okay, so now we've got all of our pattern pieces laid out. What we're going to do now is we're going to locate all of those snip marks. So this is on the centre top of the sleeve, oh, on the side of the sleeve, sorry, and then the centre top of the sleeve, that's it. So there's 3 on the sleeve to be done, and we're just going to use the blade of our snips, and we just want to cut through just a couple of millimetres of the fabric, just enough so that when we just look at it we can tell that there's a snip mark there. Okay, that's all that you need to do. So there's 1, 2, 3 on the sleeve, there's one here on the side of the back, there's none on the tie, oops, wants to hold on to me. There's 2 here on the front facing, so just a little snip. You definitely don't want to go any further than the 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, otherwise you're going to see your snips in your fabric, aren't you, in your finished garment. And again, 1 on the pocket there and 1 just there, that's those 2, and then 2 more on the actual front itself, 1, 2 there. Make sure we've got all of those, and then on this side here there's 1 just here too. See if there's 1 on the front facing. No, I've not seen that. Okay. Now the next thing then that we're going to do then is we are going to mark our tailor's tacks. So to do this you need a sewing needle, and you need a contrast thread. What colour shall we use? Let's use this deep pink, shall we? I've got here. Okay. It's just a colour that we've not got in the... Can't find the end of it. Okay, hold on 1 second. There it is, right, okay. So we're going to take a nice long length of the thread. We thread our needle, but we don't put a knot in the end. We don't need a knot at the end while we're doing tailor's tacks. There we go, got that on. So we put the 2 ends together, so that they're the same length. Okay, and then we're going to look for our tailor's tacks. So we've got 1 here on the centre front at this point here. So we take a little stitch through our fabric on either side of that circle, and we pull our thread through and we leave a tail. We then go across the opposite direction. So if that was east to west, we're going to go north to south, or south to north as I'm going here. And then we need another little tail the same length. We snip through that, and then we snip the end of the thread off. Because what that's now done is that's now marked through on both sides of the piece of fabric, that particular march point. So when we take our pins out, which is the next thing that we're going to be doing, when we get round to doing these pieces of fabric, is we are going to ease the pattern piece away first, just nice and gently. If it sticks, just make sure you put your finger on it to hold it still. And then we're going to ease those 2 pieces of fabric apart from each other till we've got a bridge of threads. And then we're going to use our snips or scissors, and we're just going to snip through that, because now we've got that mark, that point marked on both of our pieces of fabric, so that when we put these out to the side we've got those to work with. So I'm just going to go ahead, get my words right, rewind the video if you need to see it again, but I've done this several times, so I'm going to presume that you've seen it, but that's a quick and easy tailor's tack. So there's none there. There's 1 on the back of the neck just here that we need to do, another 1 on the centre front we need to do here, and none on the sleeve. The other place that I am actually going to do my tailor's tacks as well is at each of these corner points of the pocket, because that will help us line the pocket up when we come to put that on later. So I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4 tailor's tacks there, and then a couple more on the other pieces, and I'll come back to you. Okay, so one of the first things that I want you to note is that the snip on the side of the pattern piece for the pocket isn't halfway down, because if you fold your pattern piece in half, you can see that it's not on that fold line. So that means there's a top and a bottom to your pattern piece, and I've marked the top on mine. So what I've done is I've just taken a pin and marked the bottom of each of my pieces of fabric so that I know that when I look at my notches, and that I've done a bit too small on that side, but this side's okay, so let's just put this notch back in again this side, a little bit bigger so that we can see it. When we work with those, we can see that we've got one there and we've got one there, then we can know which is the top of our fabric. Okay, one there, those are okay. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to put the rough edge, so the actual ridged edge of the piping is going to lie on that line, but with this cut edge, this open edge is going to go up towards the top of the pocket. So if you can see, that's the raw edge of my piping, and that's facing the top of my pocket. I know that because I've marked the bottom with my pin, and then the actual piping itself is going to lie neatly across, just so that I can see that line there, the little notch that we cut in the piping. And you need to make sure this is straight, because this is going to be really noticeable. Oh, and it's fiddly, it doesn't want to pin. So we put that just back down there again, and then pin that in place. So we're going to be really careful when we're stitching this, because we want to have a nice edge on our pocket. So that's one just put in place there. If you want to, you can measure down as well from the top just to make sure, but I think if you put it across that way, so you should be fine. So let's locate your notch, find the edge of your piping, and you're going to have your raw edges towards the top of your pocket, and then we're just going to pop that into there, pin in there, and then we're going to come to the other side, find the notch again, which I can see my notch is there, top of the piping against the notch, and then we're going to pin that in place. So that's all ready to start. Just be careful that you've got that marked. Once we've done this, we can take the pins out at the bottom, because we'll know where we are. So put your pattern piece as well somewhere safe, so you've got that up where you need it for future reference. So the first thing I'm going to do before I start sewing this piping in place is I'm going to just zigzag across the top of the pocket edges here. So that's my pin mark in the bottom, and I'm just going to zigzag across the top, because we just need to have this neatened off. Now don't get your zigzag doesn't need to be too large. Let's just change that to my number 8, which is my zigzag. So I'm going to use a size 4 zig and zag width and then I'm going to, it's on a 2 length, that should be fine. So what I'm going to do now is just find my pedal, because it's out of the way, and then I'm just going to do my zigzag just on the edge of this, and it'll just stop it from fraying. And to save thread, because I'm using my precious Gutterman thread for this, then I'm just going to go across the top like this, and it'll just stop those little fraying edges from spoiling your work. I haven't reverse stitched because we're going to neaten these stitches down, and I can just snip in between that chain stitching, and that just gets rid of those edges. Okay, the next thing then that I'm going to do is I'm going to change my presser foot, and I'm going to find what's called a zipper foot. Now normally you get your zipper feet, sorry for the noise, in with your machine, and it's this one on my machine here, and I can just pop that on. So there's a bar across there and a hole in there, and I can just lower my presser foot down onto that. Now it's got a left and a right, so you can use either of those. You do need to make sure that before you use your presser foot now, you take your stitch off the zigzag stitch, because otherwise you're going to break your needle by zigging and zagging across. Okay. The next thing that we're going to do now is we've got this set up at the right side so that we can get really close into our piped edge. So if you wanted to tack this in place first, you could do, just to make sure that you're nice and happy with how straight it is. I think we'll be all right once we get going. But yes, change to your zipper foot, line up the edge of the binding, bias binding with the edge of your, and then you're going to find that your zip foot just sits just nice and neatly over the top of your fabric, so piping. So now you might have a little bit of a job getting started, just because you've got a bit of an edge to get over. Just be careful that you don't push your piping to one side as you're sewing. So just neaten that up as you go along. Just got one done. I'm just going to put this one straight on afterwards, just to carry on. That'll help it go through. Oh, it's trying to eat my fabric. You don't want that. Got my pin the wrong way round for the direction I'm sewing. To that point there. And it's just going to hold that in place for us. Okay. Trim off our threads. So as you can see, we've got our piping now sewn on, and the corded edge is away from the top edge on both pieces. Now we've got those on, we can take our pins out the bottom, because we now know which is the top and the bottom. Get rid of my pins. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to fold over the top edge of this pocket to the point of that binding, so you can kind of feel when there's resistance there on that binding. We don't want the binding folded, so we're not trying to fold it right over to miss the edge of the binding. You're just folding this fabric over until you feel that edge of that binding there in place, and that's as far as you need to go. So just make sure you've got that in place. And we can pop another pin in just to hold that still for us whilst we're working on it. Again, you can tack this should you wish. Do the other one while we're here. Oops, throw my pins away. Just want to make sure you've not got a rolled edge on the top of there, on that folded pocket, because you don't need that to be folded. Okay. So that's where we're going now. Now what you're going to do, now what Sarah says to do is to flip it over and stitch on the same side, but I'm going to show you a little bit of a different tip. And that is, we're going to put this back in again, but this time when we stitch, we're going to move our needle across a couple of spaces. So I'm going to move my needle position from 3.5, which on mine is in the middle. You might need to look at your instruction book to decide. And I'm going to take mine to 2.5 now across. And what you'll see is that that'll grip onto that piping much better. So I'm just going to start a couple of stitches in, because it was trying to eat my fabric last time when I started. You can use your awl if you need to. So then let's just reverse that back. And we're just trying to get really close up to that piping. When we get to the bottom, I'm just going to reverse a couple of stitches. Snip off our threads and have a look at this. And what this is going to do, I'm just going to test this one first, because it's going to encase that light binding, if you like, into there. Now ideally you don't want to see that red stitching that I can see in there. This is where the perfectionist comes in, because I will probably take out that red stitching there that's from the binding, just so you don't see that, because eventually we're going to have a little bit of a top edge on there as well, and we're going to have a pocket like this, I believe. Let me just check in the instructions. So the instructions say, after doing that bit, when you've got that bit there, fold the upper edge of the pocket down over the tape to enclose the piping tightly, press the fold with an iron, and then flip the pocket over so you can sew through all layers along the existing sewing line. Well, we've just done that with the other bit. Open up to check the piping is visible and even. Press the seam allowance upwards. Oh, okay, I was going to press that seam allowance upwards to there. So let's just get my iron and ironing board, move my pattern pieces, and we'll just press this. I'm going to press it flat first. So this is what we're going to look like. So the seam allowance has been pressed upwards, up towards the top of the pocket, and then we've got the edge there. So let's just now finish off this next one. So the next one then says, with right sides together, bring the overlap zigzag pocket edge down to just below the piping level, and then sew a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So it's going down just to below there. And we're just going to do a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Now, if you've seen me do pockets before, you know that I'm a fan of actually sewing and giving us a line to work to. So I'm going to do that again. So I'm going to change my presser foot to my previous one, which is my normal sewing foot. Sorry for the noise. I'll pop that back on again. And getting used to changing presser feet is a really good thing to be able to do. And then we're going to turn that down so it's just beyond that piping, and then we're now going to sew with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So let's line that up, and I'm going to do a few stitches forward and back just to hold that down, and then I'm going to carry on down my pocket, and I'm going to put my needle in my work. That's better. Just 1 centimetre. Then we're going to snip off the corners here, off the pockets, and then we'll be able to turn this round the other way and we'll have a pocket with a little bit of an edge and our piped trim. So let's do that because this looks like it's going to work nicely. So let's just trim that off there and trim that corner off there. So I've not gone down beyond there, not gone down beyond the edge of the fabric. One thing that we can do is if we just take our quick unpick. Where's that gone? Okay, so if we just get our quick unpick, and I'm going to need my glasses because it's close-up work. And what we're going to do is just on the edge of this piping, we're just going to undo a couple of the red stitches. Because what I want to do is I want to trim back this cord, because if you've got that piping cord and you're trying to turn it back onto itself, you're going to have a problem. So what we're going to do is just undo these stitches that we're just holding it in place. We're then going to ease open the edges of the piping cord casing, if you like. So you can see this white fluffy section. We're going to peel back the fabric that is there, back to the stitching line that we've literally just done. And then being careful not to snip the fabric, get it back as far as you can. Keep some pressure on it just to get it. I'm going to just use your snips then and just take off that thread, so that fluff from the inside, because now when you try, just put it back into place and then fold it back, you've only got one thickness of the cord in order to have to navigate. So just to do that again, I'm just going in and just taking out the stitches that are holding the piping cord in place on that edge. And the reason why we don't do it before is because we want to get it right up to that very edge. Otherwise, you either end up with a flat spot, or you end up taking off, leaving too much. And this way, you can be confident that you've taken out enough. So again, we've taken that back. We can now peel back that fabric into the corners, and it'll just give you a much easier time when we come to navigate sewing over the top of this piping cord. And I do this with all of my piping that I do, and snip it all back because it just makes such a nicer finish. Just be careful not to snip your fabric. Pull it back, and then we're ready to go. So again, let's just pop those around the other side. Wait, use the end of the hem gauge, that's the word I wanted. It's trouble when you concentrate and all your words go. Okay. And again, this one, just very gently if you're using the pointed edge of your hem gauge, because you just don't want to go through the fabric. But you need that to be a nice little sharp corner. You can always just use a pin if you need to, and just pull out that corner as well so that it just sits nice and neat. But just be really careful of your fibres, because this fabric is not very forgiving. It's not a denim or a chambray or anything else. Okay, so there we go. The other thing, as you can see now, we can see those red stitches. I think you can see those red stitches. Let me get it close to the camera for you, in there. And I will just take my quick unpick and I will undo those red stitches so that you don't see that red thread on there. Just a personal preference of mine. So we don't want to see that, do we? That's messy. Okay. Just as long as you can see the visible stitches, that's what all I'm taking out is those visible. If it goes behind the back here and you can't see them, then I'll leave those in place. Then I'll just get my snips and just cut those off really close to the edge. Sometimes you can see the stitches from the other side and you can pull them through, and then it's even better. You see even less of it, like that, and just pulled straight through. And again down here we might be lucky. Okay, so there's the top of the pocket, and as I say now, what I'm going to do is, if we get our mat and our iron here, I'm going to press the top of this pocket, so that's nice and neat, and just staying in place. And then what I'm going to do is fold back the edges of these fabrics here. I've got a bit of water on my pocket, so that we've got a nice folded edge, because we're going to do something special with the bottom corners so that the edges don't pop out. So this is something that I did on my advent calendar as well, if anybody's watched that video, because we don't want the edges to pop out. Just make sure it's nice and straight. Give it a nice little press. That's it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is on these little pockets, oh, I can't see, hold on one second. There we go. So what we're going to do now, so we've got the edges here on these pockets, and what we're going to do now is where that point is in the corner, in just here, we're going to fold this back diagonally so it just ends right on that corner just there. So you're taking that corner in. Let me just get my iron, give that a press. Right, so can you see from the front it ends right on the corner? Because then when you fold back in the other sides that you've already pressed, you get a lovely, lovely, neat little corner just there. And I'll show you the difference between the two in a second. Oh, got steam now. That's exciting, isn't it? Might not be for you if it's steaming up the camera. Right, so here, let me just show you. So here is the corner I've just done, look, with a nice point to it. No raw edges anywhere near the edge of that corner. If you just fold it up, like fold it in and then fold it up, what you find is that when you try and stitch this down, quite often you have this little edge just here of this pocket that's trying to peek out. And if you look on my edge, there's no raw edge anywhere near that corner. So that's why I do this way round. So again, I have folded it up like that just to start off with, to give her as a guide. But now I fold it across so it's at a diagonal with that first little stitch there. You can just see it. Okay, and then taking my iron, oops, not working very well, the cable's not long enough from the position I've got it. I can just press that in, and then I can just fold up those two edges like we were before. Make sure it ends on the corner on a point, and then you just give it a quick press again, and that just holds it in place. And what it does is just gets those edges in, so you're not having to navigate round in order to stop all those little edges popping out. Again here, this is a little bit messy for me, but we've not got the thickness of the red thread to get to navigate as well, so that's good. And the pockets are going to be one of the first things you see. So again, there we go, a nice little pocket, just making sure that that's as straight and even as we can get it. Okay, and I'm just going to work on the next one now. Just going to press these edges in a little bit more, just so they're going to be nice when we come to iron that. So just give that a final press. And that's one pocket all done. So I'm just going to go now and do the second pocket. Okay, so once you finish that, you should end up with two pockets that are roughly the same size and the same depth. and that's roughly got the same amount of turnover at the top. So just go back and adjust them if they're not the same, because mine are pretty much the same for this. And then we're going to look for the front pattern piece with our 4 notches, not notches, 4 tailor's tacks on to mark the front of our pockets. We've slipped through all of these, so we can just open this up now. Just make sure we've not got anything caught. No, we haven't. Just open those carefully. And we're going to pop these out so that we've got 2 mirrored copies. So we've got our tailor's tack at the top up here, and 1, 2, 3, 4 there. So we're just going to take a pocket, and we're going to choose how we're going to line this up. So I'm going to line up my bottom 2 right on the marks, and then I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to pop a pin in and out down towards the corner, so that's holding that corner straight for me. I'm going to take another pin and put that in, so that's holding that corner straight for me as well. Get nice and close into those corners if you can. Okay, you'll see we've not got to battle with any little edges poking out at the sides there. The next thing I do then is try and just straighten up my pocket so that it's in line with the other notches. Not notches, I keep saying that, don't I? Tailor's tacks. And then we're going to put another pin in just to hold that straight on the top. And we're going to do this on both of them. Now, if you could see, I do pin my pockets so that the heads of my pins are all in towards the centre of the pocket, and we've just got the points of the pins. I don't want to sew over my pins, but I want to be able to take those out at the very last minute. So if I hold that up to you, you can see that the heads of the pins are all in the middle here, and the points are all out towards the edges. Because when we start stitching here and then go down, we don't want to be having to navigate around the heads of the pins, and we can get really close then. You can put extras in if you want, or you can even tack this down first. You don't want to tack down the top here of the pocket, just down the 3 sides down there, across the bottom and back up again on the other side. So let's do the other one. The other one has the tufts of the tailor's tacks, but that's okay. And again, we are just going to pin our pins in towards the corners. I have to just turn it round so that you can navigate around. But that's going to make sure that the pockets are level on both sides for you. You can use a little pen mark if you want to, but the proper way is to do a tailor's tack, which is a really nice. If you get used to doing them, they don't take long to do either. Okay, so that's 3. And then this is 4. Now the next thing I'm going to do is just make sure that when we put these 2 pieces together like that, the pockets look even. So the pocket bottoms are even and the tops are pretty even, so that's good. So we're going to do that. So I'm just going to take this to the sewing machine now. We can take our tailor's tacks out if you want. I sometimes wait till the end, but with the tufty ones, I think sometimes they can get in the way. They've served their purpose. We've got this pinned in place now, so we're happy with that. It'll just save a little bit of time taking those out at the end. So we've got that pinned in place. And now we're going to take it over to the sewing machine again. Let me just change the angle. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so just going to take that over to the sewing machine now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my needle across to this left-hand side by 0.5 so that I can get right close to the edge of here and just be right on the edge with my needle, because sometimes if you're in the middle it can mean that your top stitching just wavers around. So by being here, also have to hand your awl or your pointy tool so that you can help this through if you need to. If you've not got an awl, you can use the point of a quick unpick, but just keep your blade, the blade bit away from it, because you don't want to be cutting any fabric. Hold on to our threads when we start, just for a couple of stitches. And I'm going to go forward a couple of stitches, and then I'm going to go back a couple of stitches, just to anchor that in place. And then I'm going to put my needle in my work and anchor it down. I can then take out the first pin holding the first corner, because that corner is now anchored down. Over the piping you might need your awl, so just keep that to hand and have that ready just to help this through. A couple of stitches, nice and slow, until we just go down the other edge, and you're trying to stay nice and neat on the edge of your pocket, nice and even with the number of millimetres you are away from the edge. Take it nice and steady because you are top stitching. One more stitch, I think. And we're going to go right down into that corner. And to then twist around. And we're then going to avoid this pin here because we take that one out because we're now on that bottom corner anyway. In fact, I think I might be able to do just one more stitch. In fact, I'll hand crank it and that'll make it sure. That's fine. Okay. Right, so now we're going to go across the bottom just here. Again, use your awl if you need to. Take your time, nice and steady. But stop before you get to that bottom pin and then take that one out. So we're trying not to sew over our pins at any stage. And then we're going to carry on across. Just going to hand crank just one more stitch because we want to be right on that edge. Maybe too much on the edge with that one. Just drop it back just a little bit, that's it. Right, okay, and then this other side. Nice and steady. Come into our piping again. So we're just going to take that pin out there. Leaving my needle in my work, I just want to lift it up and I just want to make sure I've got all of the fibres of that edge all tucked under nice and neat. So I'm just using my awl just to put those underneath and then hold it in place while I just sew over the top of that. And then a couple of stitches back just to hold that in place. And then lift this up. Okay, snips. Let's snip our threads off. I'm leaving those a little bit longer because you guessed it, we're going to take these through to the back. So we just take this through to the other side, and if we pull on the thread, sometimes the last stitch will come through for us. And it's not on this one, so that's fine. So we go back and find our needle we used for our Tailors Tacks, which was this one for me. Just my glasses. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to thread our needle with our thread from the top side because we want to take it through from the other side, don't we? Can you tell I'm a little bit rusty? I've had a couple of weeks off of doing tutorials and I'm quite rusty. I'm going to pop that through on the same stitch line through to the other side, and then we can take a couple of knots in that just to secure that down. Okay, and then what you can do is you can either snip those off, or if you snip them so that they're even and rethread your needle with both ends of the thread, what we can do is we can find the edge of that pocket and we can just slide the needle down the sewn edge of that pocket inside the channel. Hold on a second, let me just get it right so I can show you. So you can see the point of my needle is down here, and you can't see the needle on that side, and you can't see the needle on that side because it's just going down through that channel there of the edging. And if we pop that through and then pull it carefully, it will pull those threads down inside because this isn't lined. So what it actually does, is it actually hides those threads inside that seam for us. So if you look there, those stitches aren't ever going to come undone now. A little bit of whiskers on the edge there. Let me just get rid of those. Not too much because we don't want it to fray. Okay, and we've just hidden those threads down inside. So let's do that again with the other one. So let's just thread this one through. Or you can rewind the video, or you can fast forward. If you're understanding what I'm doing, then feel free to just fast forward. Just smooth it out. And there you can see, so you're there, we've hidden the threads on the inside, on the inside of the thread channels, and so we've got a nice neat edge here, nice neat edge there, and they're not going to come undone. So I'm just going to do that on my other pocket. I'm just going to sew my other pocket on exactly the same, and then we'll be able to then move on to the next stage of construction. So if you're like me, when you start sewing things, you start to notice what you would do differently the next time round. And once we've got these pockets on nice and neat, and we've got the corners lovely and neat with no raw edges poking out, and just before I go on to the next bit, what I would do is if you can see any of your threads, the stitching line that you use to iron it over, just take those stitches out, because you don't want to see those on the front. You just want to see your top stitching on the front. But what I would do next time is I would probably extend the top of the pocket by a good deal more, because I think that whilst that gives a nice edge, I think that that's very close to there, and it was fiddly to try and get it turned over, and there's nothing to say that that can't close a little bit further down. So I think I would add probably another centimetre on the top here, so that when you're folding this down after you've encased your piping and then you're having to fold the top of the thing back down again, I would just have it finishing just a little bit further down the pocket and have a bit more of a turnover. So that would be my recommendation for next time when I make this. I would just extend that just by a centimetre, just so you've got a bit more room to move. You know that we've got fabric left over, so I don't quite know why that wasn't done that way. But anyway, that's just one little tip. So now we have the 2 pockets on the front. We're going to put those 2 to one side, and we are going to find our sleeve. So we've got our sleeve. Just make sure you've got your notches going through your fabrics in all the 3 places. And this time the top edge has got a notch, so we'll remember which one is the top edge. And we're also going to do our piping again now on this pattern piece for the sleeve. I'm just taking my pins out. Pattern piece can go somewhere safe, and we just need to remember which is the top so that we don't get these the wrong way round as well. And then we're going to find our piping tape again, and we are going to measure a piece that goes across but not past the edge of our sleeve edge. And make sure you get the line going across, so there's a notch on the top here to tell us which is the top, so make sure you're going across properly. So there's a notch there, a notch there and a notch there, so you want that one there. And we're going to do another piece so that we've got our 2 pieces the same size. There we go. Now on these we are actually going to overlap the edge of the sleeve slightly. So if you look on the picture, where can we look and see? So on the picture, you can see it there maybe. So at the underarm there, you've got 2 bits of piping that are going to be matching together. And we're going to plan for that in advance, because having all of that bulk in one place is going to be too much. So we're going to trim back the cord from out of the centre of the piping before we actually construct this. We could do it the other way that we did it before as well, but I don't know, I just feel like it might be better off just this way. So we're just going to undo the first centimetre of the piping, trim our thread off, peel back the piping, and you can do it this way on the other bit if you wanted to, but it's just going to give it a nicer edge when we come to finish that back. I'm just going to snip off that cord. I'm just going to do that on all 4 edges just to neaten it off so that we've got that all neatened. Just peel that back. Just be careful you don't pull on your cord too much, otherwise you will get rid of too much. So I'm literally just taking off this much here, which is the amount of the seam allowance, and then just smoothing that fabric back down again. Okay, as again we're going to find our notches for the top of our piping. I'm going to put a pin in. Make sure we've got the top, yes I have. Just make sure that it's stretching right across as it should do. And make sure that it's straight as well. Okay, and then on the other side again we can do the same. That piping cord goes down to that edge. Oh, I haven't trimmed it yet. Right, I'll do this one in a minute after I've trimmed it, because I don't want you to have to sit and wait and watch. What we're going to do now is get our sewing machine, and we're going to get our zipper foot again. Just going to change that zipper foot out. Again, you can tack your thread if you want to, your piping down if you want to first. We're going to start on the edge here. I'm going to move my needle back, because I did take it off, didn't I? Back to 3.5. And then finding my presser foot, I'm going to just start to take a few stitches. Have my awl ready, because when you're working with piping, when you're working with piping, it doesn't always want to play ball with you. It doesn't always want to feed through nicely. There we go. Keep it nice and straight. Needle in your work just to hold that all down. On this first pass, it's just really just about holding it in place. Go down to the work, snips, just cut our threads off. So the tape on this again, just like on the pockets, is towards the top of the garment. So there's our notch for our top, and this is our piping here. So now we're going to fold this back over again, making our channel, making sure that we don't overstretch the make a roll on the top of that piping thread. Bless you, that was my husband. Bless him. Okay. And just pin that down, and then we're just going to press that in place as well. And now I'm going to move the needle a couple of points across to the left, so that when I stitch this in place now, the piping is going to be even tighter. See how it's not gripping as well as it should do, so just help it through, either with the awl or with your pulling on the threads at the back. Oops, just getting a little pucker there, even our work. Lift my presser foot up just to ease that. Trim our threads. Okay. So then we are then going to seam allowance upwards, so that's all fine. So we can do that just quickly. And then it wants us to bring the finished edge of the hem, there's our notch, up to here, and then we're just going to fold that back, and we're just going to zigzag that in place. Let me just show you again. So this is the bottom edge, the edge without the notch on it. We're going to fold it up so that it is in line with the folded edge of the piping. Just here. Put a couple of pins in just to hold it and just to show you. So this is going to give us our nice turned cuff. Okay, so then we're going to just zigzag across there, so that when we open this out, we've got this lovely folded cuff on the bottom, and that's been neatened off on this edge here. Okay, can you see? And this is the side with the notch. That's going to go into the sleeve to make the top of the sleeve when it's finished. Okay, take your zipper foot off first before you try to do any zigzagging, otherwise you will break your needle. Ask me how I know. Over many years of sewing, I've learned that one. So put onto your zigzag stitch. Mine's number 8. I'm going to do a 4 width, and I'm going to do a 2 length. So just fold this back out again so that you can get to that finished edge, and then pop it on. I'm just going to do that zigzag now. Take our edges off. And then when we open that out, we've got a neat little zigzagged edge on the inside, and that's the folded edge of the cuff just there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm also going to take out those red threads as well in there because I don't like those showing on my piping. So at the end of it all, threads, you should end up with 2 sleeves, a right and a left. And what's happened here is, without even realising, is I've got pattern matching look going on because both cuffs have got the one row of the paisley and one row of the dots just right by the hem. So I'm pretty happy with that, really. Totally fluke, but I'm going to take credit for it. But this is what it looks like on the inside once you've finished. So as you can see, that's where we zigzagged that edge down just there, and the stitching line from our piping. There's the little notch at the top of the sleeve, so you can see that that's the top on both of them, and that's all correct. And then you've got this folded edge down at the bottom, which will all be really lovely when we fold that over and sew that together, and then we've got a lovely sleeve going on. So the next thing that we're going to do then is to take the 2 fronts again, I believe, and the front facings, then we're going to stitch those together at the shoulders. So let me just pop these to one side, and then we're going to get the other pieces and we'll get started on the next bit. Okay, so we've got our 2 front pieces here. We know those because we've got our pockets on. We're going to put one on top of the other, so they're right sides together. We're going to match up this top edge here. So just to show you, that's that top edge. And then we're going to sew this together here with a 1/4 inch or 1/2 centimetre seam allowance. So let's just pin that. And then to make more economic use of our time, let's get the front facing as well. And we're going to do the same with that. So we're going to take the pins out of this piece here. And then we're going to be able to put our pattern piece, got our Tailors tack marks, that's good. And then we're going to turn these around so that we've got our 2 right sides together. If I'm going to split the fabric, yep. So put those right sides together, and then we're going to match those 2 up again together as well, and we're going to do that same centre, back, centre, neck seam really, isn't it? It's the back of the neck. Okay, so 1/2 centimetre on both of those. Let's get the sewing machine ready. Can you see? Yes, you can. And literally 1/4 inch. And I'm still on my zigzag stitch. Bear with me 1 second. So if you're going to do it correctly, we're now going to sew this now with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just going to reverse at the start and the stop, needle in the work before we take our pins out so we don't put a jig in the work, and then just sew that across. Stop before we get to the last pin. And again, to save fabric, we can chain stitch. Going slightly off there. And take our threads off. Oops, got red thread everywhere. And just snip down that centre bit there. It just saves the thread from start and stop. And then what we're going to do then is we are going to press the seam open and flat, and then get ready to with our piping again. So let's just open this out here. Oops. We can finger press this open to start with, just like that. And then we're going to take it over to the pressing mat and just press those open. So this is the centre back of the neck, so it's going to form part of the collar when we're sewing this all together. Let me just press these 2 flat for a second. Right, those are 2 both pressed flat and open at the back. And then on the pin the piping, onto the curved front. So let's get the piping here. Let's make sure that it's long enough and it's going to reach. And we are going to sew it so that the edges of the piping, raw edges, are all together. So I'm matching up that edge just there. Then a pin's going in. And then all the way along, without stretching the piping or the fabric, you've got to just lay it on top of each other. You don't want it to be tight and to get any puckers in it at all. You just want it just to lie flat on top of one another. So from here we've got a little bit of a curve coming out. So we need to just accommodate for that in the piping. But as I say, because it's bias piping, the fabric that's covering the cord is cut on the bias. It'll have some flexibility with it. Again, you can tack this on if you wish to. I'm going to just sew mine straight on, but you can tack it if you wish to. Just accommodate the back of that neck. Use as many pins as you like or not. I'll just attach this onto here for us so that we can sew it, and we're going to put our piping foot back on again, and we're going to be stitching this down with our piping foot first. Whenever we're sewing piping, we always do attach it to one side first. I wouldn't ever recommend that you put the other side of the facing straight on and try and join it together as one piece. I would always do it in what they call two passes. I'd go through first to just attach the piping onto one side, and then I would go through the second. Oh look, it is just the right length, so you've really not got any room for error on your piping at all. They weren't joking, were they? Okay, in the instructions to make sure that that's all right. Okay, so there we go. So this is, let me just move this back so you can see a bit better. So this is the cutout for where the neck is going to go, and along the curved edge all along here, going out then in again and down to the bottom, we've got our piping pinned on it. Okay, so that's the neck edge that's going to make the collar. So the first thing that we're going to do now is to sew that piping into place with our zipper foot again. Keep putting it away and then I keep using it again. Okay, there it is. So put this back on. Make sure you're not on a zigzag stitch before you attach this, just to make sure that you're going to have room. And the first thing I'm going to do is, I think it's going to move across my needle just so that it's moved across more to the left, just so it gets nice and tight into that piping. So again, we can just see where that is. Make sure that you don't, I just pushed that across slightly and that came away from the edge of the fabric. We want this to be right on the edge of the fabric. If you wanted to, you could use a tacking length stitch, or you could tack this by hand if you wish to as well. But if you're careful, I think you can do it by hand, because you can see when the edge of the fabric peeps out. So you just make sure that you're, whoops, a bit too fast, Claire. Make sure that you're staying on the edge. All the way up as you go along. Oops, something's making a funny noise. And then we're going to go just until it gets straight, and then we can see there's a bit of a curve. So I'm just using my finger just to push that fabric, the binding, across to the edge of the curve. And come around the collar. Just pull your fabric back if you start to see the edges. You want it to be nice and even. So again, we're going back around the other side now, just make sure that's all nice. Back down to the end of the curve before it starts to straighten out, so just make sure we don't lose any of that curve. edge down here. All the way, I'm just checking the instructions just to make sure it did say to put all the piping right the way down to the bottom. We can always undo it if we need to. Right. Unsnip our threads. Start on the end. And that's what we've got at the moment. So we've got this binding is now just all stitched down into place. So that when we turn that round, it's going to have a lovely edge to it when that's stitched on. Okay. Let me have a look at the instructions, just see what they say to do next, and we'll move forward. Okay, so the next stage we're going to do then is going to take our facing piece and put that right sides together over the top of our fabric, and we're going to match this seam point at the centre back here, and we're just going to pop a pin in there just to hold that into place. Okay, we're then going to go down to the bottom of our facing because we want to match up the edge down here. So again, let's match that to make that absolutely spot on perfect, and put all the raw edges together and pop a pin in. Now let's go to the other end and let's do the same thing. I haven't trimmed off that extra bit yet, but we can do in a second. Just make sure that your facing matches the hem of your front piece. And then what I want you to do is find out, have a look on your pattern where you got the curve and then it goes straight, because what I want you to do is locate pretty much the same place on the other side and pin that as your next match point. There's no notch there, but it's just where the curve, I don't know if you can see here on the fabric here, so there's a curve there and then it goes straight. That's the point at which we're trying to match next. It's very subtle, so just be aware that you might just need a couple of looks at it just to locate it. Because with sewing the binding on, the piping in, it sometimes just sort of bunches up the fabric a little bit. So we just need to make sure that we've got this straight and that we're not losing any of the curve or distributing the curve wrongly. So now I'm just going through and just pinning in between each of those points just to put it through. So I'm only doing the straight edges at the moment, I haven't done the curve as yet. So that's that bit down there all nice and in place. Let's go down and do the other side now. Just I haven't done around the collar yet, so I'd kind of just sort of lay it on top of each other like that, and then match up those centre points and just get it matching nice and neatly in the middle. And then I then go down and just really just split the difference with it so that we've got it nice and evenly matched. And then when we're sewing it, we'll know if this is going to start and bunch up, because under a piping foot or a zipper foot sometimes it does bunch up. So now we can see we've got quite a lot extra here. Now there are 2 notches on the back here, so we're going to match those 2 notches up with the 2 notches on each side. That's our next match point to make sure that they're right. And then we're then just going to lay this on top of each other, and it should, she says, it should line up. So we've got a bit extra there, look. So again, we can just smoosh those fibres together and they should sit down on top of each other. It's called easing in when you do that, when you just sort of press down on those fibres, and it should just fit in nicely. There we go. Apologies for the noise from upstairs again. Right, 2 notches there, 2 notches there. Let's put those on top of each other. Just doing the other side now. Popping those in. And then back in again and pin this collar together so that it's nice and even. So one thing that you'll notice is that the facing isn't as deep either as the front fabric, so it's not going to go back quite as far. Just give that a little pull and it should just enable us just to lay that on top of each other and it go right. Now Sarah does suggest in the instructions that you actually start at the centre front and sew down one side and then tip it over and start from that centre back seam here and then sew down the other side, just to make sure that curve distributes nicely as we're going along. Just move that one down slightly. Ouch, that was my finger. And that should then just sit nicely on there. So let's try have a go at doing that and see how we get on. So, we've got to leave our zipper foot on because we need that to be able to sew with because of the piping, because it gets in the way. There is no way on this earth that you will be able to sew this with your ordinary presser foot, so don't even try. It just won't work. So we're on again our straight stitch. Just make sure that before you start stitching, and just forward and back. And we're just trying to sew in close to the edge of the piping. Needle in the work before you take your pins out. Have your awl to hand if you need to, just to keep these edges together. And you're just trying to just help that fabric through so that it doesn't start to bunch up under the needle and under the presser foot, because with the zipper foot it can do that because I don't know why, it just drags on it for some reason. Take that one out because I think that's bunching up. And again, just like with ordinary stitches, if you just get it starts to pull up a little bit, you can just take it out, release the pressure under the presser foot and then go again. You can see I'm getting a little bit of bunching here, look. So I'm just going to pull a little bit of pressure on the top on the fabric and it's just going to pull it straight for me. Just want to avoid any puckers. We're trying to get these pieces, they're pretty much the same size. I think if there's a few mils difference at the bottom, I think I will probably not worry about it too much, so long as the fabric is lying flat, and probably just trim that off. As you can see, sometimes it's just not wanting to. So I'm just putting a little bit of pressure on the back just to hopefully set. So mine is going to end up a little bit longer. I think, but just marginally. Millimeters, but that's okay. So at the end I just sort of stretched out that last bit and it just pulled it in. So what you end up with is you end up with this piping in the edge of your fabric just there, so you've got a lovely piped edge, so that when you put the collar around the back of the neck you've got that piped edge going around the back. So now I'm going to turn this over after I trim my threads off where I started. And although I've got my pins going to the other side, I am going to stitch on this side because I can still take them out because they're just at the back there. Just getting caught. Pins are in the wrong direction, but hopefully we can manage. Where's my awl gone? Make sure you've got your raw edges together. Just use the awl as well just to pull those pins out as we go along. Don't go too fast because it'll snatch at your fabric. The feed dogs underneath will be trying to grab more than they should. Oops. Pins. This side is easing in slightly better. pin flew off. Okay. So take our threads off again where we've started and stopped. I need to do my bobbin in a second. We're playing bobbin chicken. My seam allowance has just flicked over at the back here, so I'm just going to ease that off a little bit. I'm just going to trim off these seam allowances at the back here, just the loose ears. Just a triangle just takes those off. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is just on this curved edge, I am just going to use my pinking shears and just ease this off again, just to allow it just to sit properly. Just be careful that you've not got any of your other fabric underneath you folded back, because you haven't got any extra to play with at all. Take those bits off. Just help that seam curve better. And then what we can do then is this then just folds out through to the other side like this. And just gives us that nice edge. Okay, let's have a look and see if Sarah says to understitch at all. Be right the first a little longer, because Tara said about seeing then do something again. Trim around the ear says. No, okay. So trim away the seam allowance around the curved edges of the collar before pressing to the right side. So right side's out. So I'm just going to take this over to the pressing mat. Yes, thank you to my mother-in-law Enid for my Christmas money, because that's what I've used to buy this little mini iron and wool pressing mat. Quite pleased with it so far, for these little lunar things. And then we can then just press that out, so that's now flat. And that's going to give this lovely collar edge that we've got. Again, I will go through and just take out that red thread if I can see any of it on my piping. I can just there, because I don't like to see that when on the finished garment. Not a pucker, is it? It's just where it's just not pressing right. That's it. Okay. So that's what we're end up with. We end up with this. Don't pull your seam allowance out. The Tailors Tacks out. So we've got this lovely piped edge here against the piped pocket, going all the way around the curve of that collar and then back down the other side. And that's how it looks from the other side. So it's looking pretty good.